conversation. We're having a conversation on the Caribbean we want to see. Now, coming up very soon, we have in Antigua the Small Island Developing States Conference. And this morning, as we talk about this, we have the Senior Technical Officer for Natural Resources, Ainka Granderson, who's going to be talking to us more about this. And she is from Canary. Good morning, Mrs. Anderson, and how are you doing?
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So, can you tell our viewers more about what Canary does and a little bit about the Caribbean We Want to See conference?
Yes, so the Caribbean Natural Resources Institute, Canary, is a regional technical nonprofit that has been working across the Caribbean for 35 years. But we're actually headquartered right here in Trinidad and Tobago. We work on promoting collaboration and the stewardship of natural resources to support sustainable development in the region. So the conference that's coming up in Antigua and Barbuda next week from May 27th to 30th is a conference about the new 10-year agenda for sustainable development in what are called small island developing states, SIDS. And so the idea is that the SIDS come together along with our development partners and really discuss and identify what are the priorities for the next 10 years for sustainable development, and lay that out in a plan of action. And so that's what's going to be launched next week in Antigua, a new plan of action for 2024 to 2034.
Excellent. And one of my questions is how much of the information and the recommendations that you guys put forward actually become implemented into policy?
A really great question. So, in terms of the actual conference, we had really gotten together with other NGOs, community groups, activists to really ensure that there's a strong voice for Caribbean citizens in this process of developing that new 10-year agenda. Because, as you know, governments are obviously front and center in the negotiating process for developing this new plan of action. But we felt that there wasn't maybe enough involvement of civil society. And so we got together to produce this Caribbean We Want document, which lays out key priorities for what we want to see moving forward. And so a number of these priorities are sort of picked up in the plan of action, but there's still a lot of gaps and things that we would love to see more of. And I can give you a bit of a snapshot of kind of like some of the 4 priorities that we really want to kind of push for when we're at the conference next week.
So, do you have any persons from the THA that you know that are registered for the conference and that are going to be there?
Delegation that's going from Trinidad and Tobago that's being led by Minister Penelope Beckles from the Ministry of Planning and Development. I actually don't have all the details of who else is on the delegation, but I expect that someone from TAJ would be attending because it's a quite important conference and there's a lot of really important discussions happening.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you for that. Now, what have you guys realized recently looking into some of the issues that come to the forefront as being some of the key issues in the Caribbean that we want? Because here in Tobago, currently, we're seeing a surge in crime. So as we go forward, and for this particular conference, what are some of the key headline topics that you guys would be discussing?
So in terms of the 4 priorities or recommendations in the Caribbean we want, we're trying to address, I think, major development challenges that are facing Trinidad and Tobago, but also the wider region. And so that includes growing inequality, which is driving crime and poverty, also the climate crisis, which is a significant issue, as well as issues around nature and environmental destruction that's happening. So we're focusing on 4 things. So the first is obviously looking at things like economic development and recognizing that it's not just about big business, but supporting those micro and small businesses that are actually the basis of our local economy and livelihoods. So we're really trying to support that and really push for a focus on benefiting people, protecting the planet, and ensuring prosperity. So that's one of the things. Another recommendation is really ensuring that we're leaving no one behind and addressing that growing inequality and instability that we're seeing. So really about pushing for social justice, gender justice, climate justice, environmental justice, and really thinking about how we can get that better integrated into how we govern. So, for example, in Trinidad and Tobago right now, we're updating our constitution, and there is a movement to really push for a right to a healthy and safe environment as one of the human rights that should be enshrined in our constitution. A lot of other constitutions around the world have this, but we don't have that here in Trinidad and Tobago as yet.
Understood. And Canary will be representing Trinidad and Tobago in their capacity. What is the main message that you guys, particularly your organization, is driving into SIDS?
So for us, the real big issue that we're trying to drive is that there needs to be a strong and active role for civil society, for our citizens in decision making and governance. So obviously we want our actual document focuses on how governments, as well as our development partners, can recognize and better support the amazing work that we're doing as NGOs and other civil society actors here in Tobago, Trinidad, and across the region. From working with farmers and fisher folk on sustainable agriculture, to youth development, to addressing gender-based violence and crime, and protecting our forests and coasts. So we really need to support that active role for civil society and really see civil society as a key partner alongside government, alongside private sector, to really deliver the real work that we want to see and the change we want to see on the ground.
And how has the message that you guys have been pushing and the work that you've been doing impacting persons on the island of Tobago particularly?
So in terms of impacts on Tobago, what we would like to see is, obviously this is a global agreement, but it does shape things that happen nationally and specifically in Tobago, in the sense that what is agreed shapes the kind of policies that we move forward with, but also shapes the type of investment that we get, the type of foreign aid that we get, the type of technical assistance that we get from the United Nations and other agencies. And so what we put forward in that document, what we agree on, is important in terms of shaping that wider context, which allows us to have more investment in economic development and to really shape the way that we want to see things happen in our islands. And so I know there's lots of issues in Tobago right now, from crime, from issues around coastal management with the oil spill and all kinds of different issues. And so that kind of new 10-year sustainable development agenda is about trying to make sure that we're really addressing those challenges head on and getting the support that we need from other development partners, from developed countries like the US and Canada and Europe, to really support us in moving forward.
And a lot of your recommendations come at a policy level. But how does the work that you do actually impact the people on the ground? How do you really break it down to the base level where the average person understands the impact of the work that you guys are doing?
So maybe a quick example is, we are trying to support local coastal communities, both in Tobago and Trinidad right now, to build their resilience to changes that we're seeing along the coast due to climate change, but also other development processes that are happening. And so some concrete stuff that we're doing is we're actually working with fisherfolk and local community-based organizations to see how we can build their capacity, train them, actually help them to use more innovative technologies like drones and mobile apps and other things to really support them to be able to better monitor what's happening, but also take action themselves to address these issues, but also in partnership with the TAJ and other agencies that are supporting coastal management and governance. So that's maybe one concrete example of the types of things that we do. And then we try to connect that to what's happening at the regional and global level by making sure that the needs of people on the ground are recognized in these big global processes.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mrs. Granderson. And before you go, what is your call to action for the people listening this morning?
So the call to action is that, we as citizens have a voice. We shouldn't be sitting back and waiting for elections every 4 years, but really making it known what we want to see in terms of our own development, our own priorities. And so we really sort of encourage people to make their voices heard, to pay attention to the issues. And, we're here to support that and amplify local voices to make sure that we see the Caribbean we want.
Excellent, guys. Thank you so much again. That was Ainka Granderson from Canary, and she is the Senior Technical Officer on Natural Resources Institute. Sorry. Guys, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be back right after this.